My story is a love story, but only those tortured by love can know what I mean. Imprisonment in the death house has only strengthened my feelings for Raymond. These were the last words from Martha Beck before she was executed for her crimes, referenced by an article from History.com. Martha Beck and her lover, Raymond Fernandez, were an unusual love story that led to many innocent women's deaths. Around 20 women have been targeted by this couple and subsequently lost their life. On May 6, 1920, Martha Seabrook was born in Milton, Florida. Martha suffered a glandular condition which caused her to physically mature faster than other children, gain weight, and have a sexual drive of a grown adult. This is referenced by Killers of the Lonely Heart book by Flowers. She was a victim of incest and made fun of by her classmates, which led to loneliness and depression. Once she finished school, Martha continued her education by attending nursing school in Pensacola, Florida. She then found a job in Pensacola Hospital. Shortly after that, she relocated to Florida and became an Army nurse. She ended up pregnant, and the father of her child would not marry her, which led her back to Florida. She made up some story about the father of her child that was in the service and was killed. It became a feature in a local newspaper, and not shortly after that, she became pregnant again with Alfred Beck's child. They quickly got married and divorced not only but 6 months later. A single mother like herself then placed an ad in the Lonely Hearts column of the newspaper, and Raymond Fernandez answered. Fernandez suffered from a brain injury in an accident that left him bald with serious headaches. This was referenced from History.com. He convinced himself that he had power over women and could turn them into his sexual slaves. He wanted a lock of Beck's hair for his voodoo practice to gain mastery over women. Not long after they met for the first time in Florida, Beck then became infatuated with Fernandez. Fernandez had all of the intentions of conning her, but after an affair, they fell madly in love. When she went to visit New York, he had intentions of breaking off the relationship. Beck grew distraught and was fired from her job in Florida, which also led her to bring her 2 children to New York to see if Fernandez then would take them in. He agreed to take Beck in, but not her 2 children because he had abandoned his own. Beck then took her children to the Salvation Army and left them, and a week later they began their life. Shortly after that, Fernandez let him in on his secret. This is referenced by an article by Stacy Green. He told her about how he was conning women and stealing from them. She decided to join him and pose as his sister. So this is Martha Beck and then Raymond Fernandez. This is their mugshots, and then this is just a photo of them. They decided then to make this scam even bigger and turned it into murder. Fernandez would often marry his victims, and Beck grew extremely jealous. They would steal thousands of dollars from these women. If Fernandez ever ended up having sex with these victims, Beck's temper would grow greater than ever. One of their victims, Janet Faye of Albany, New York, was one of them. On December 31st, 1948, Fernandez met with Faye at her apartment while Beck stayed at the hotel. Once Faye felt comfortable enough, Beck would invite her over to spend the night, and they would invite Beck over to stay the night in Faye's apartment. Soon after, a marriage proposal came, and Faye agreed to become Fernandez's wife. They were going to move to Fernandez and Beck's apartment, but not before they emptied Faye's bank account of about $6,000. Beck became outraged when she found Faye naked with her arm around Fernandez in their bed. Beck took her anger out on Faye by bludgeoning Faye until she lost consciousness. They began to strangle Faye until she ultimately died from the trauma. They took the body in a trunk to Fernandez's actual sister's house, and she was able to let them keep that there without knowing the contents inside. A few days later, they picked up the trunk and buried it in a rental house, covering it in cement in the cellar. They continued to cash Faye's checks in hopes it would throw the family off, and also wrote letters via typewriter to let them think that she was still alive. Faye's family grew suspicious and contacted authorities. She did not have a typewriter, and they kind of gathered this isn't right. The duo had already moved to the next victim. They were on their way to Michigan where they met Daphne Downing. This is some evidence of some of the crime scenes. And then these are some of the houses. So this is Janet Faye's basement where they buried her in the cellar. And then this is the Daphne Downing house. They met Delphine Downing. She had a 2-year-old daughter as well. Downing let them, of course, move in as soon as her and Fernandez started having sexual relations, Beck instantly became jealous. They ended up giving Downing sleeping pills where she slept and her daughter cried. They grew tired of the crying and strangled that poor child unconscious. Fearing the marks left on her neck, Fernandez grabbed a handgun and wrapped it in a blanket and shot Downing, killing her instantly. While at the home for a few days, they cleaned up the mess they made after killing Downing and had to figure out what to do with the child. They drowned the girl and discarded her remains the same way as her mother. Neighbors grew worried and reported Downing missing. The same day, the duo was arrested and taken in for questioning. Both were willing to talk about the Lonely Hearts victims. The duo went back to trials and Beck signed a confession, but unfortunately the plea did not hold up. The public wanted nothing less than to see them sentenced to death. Michigan, where they got arrested, did not have the death penalty, but the court decided to extradite them to New York to stand trial for Janet Faye. After many trial days, they were sentenced to death. On March 8, 1951, Raymond Martinez Fernandez and Martha Beck were put to death in the electric chair. Fernandez was first and was described as a broken man, panic-stricken and paralyzed with fear. As the guards forced him onto the chair, next was Beck, taking her fate courageously. Prior to leaving her cell, she said to the media, "What does it matter who is to blame? My story is a love story. In the history of the world, how many crimes have been attributed to love? Love makes you do crazy things, and in this case of an unstable couple, they decided murder was going to bring them together." This is the murder of the Lonely Hearts.